Welcome, everyone. So my name is Maureen Cornelis. I'm the co-panel leader, along with Clémence Roth, who's here with me. In this panel, we focus on how energy efficiency policies can be financed, designed, implemented, and managed to generate optimal and lasting energy savings. We have a few amazing speakers with us today who will be focusing on decision-making to foster energy efficiency. Our first speaker today will be Eric Bush, who's the CEO of Top 10 GmbH. Then we will be followed by Amandine Gall, who is an energy efficiency project manager at Econoller. Then Jürgen Flosch, head of department at AEE. Then he will be presented along with Winfried Braumann. And the last speaker is Stefan Buttner, who is the Global Strategy and Impact Director at the University of Stuttgart and the Institute for Energy Efficiency in Production. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Clémence, do you have anything to add?
I have got some additions regarding the Q&A. So as you have noticed, we have a webinar situation, so you will only be able to see and hear the panelists. There is unfortunately no chance to see each other like we usually do in France. So you're missing my shorts also today, because eceee is one of the few and rare events where I'm wearing shorts normally. Not today, unfortunately. So you're going to have that next year. If you have any questions, on the presentations, please post them in the Q&A session of Woover. I will also monitor all the other channels, but you make my life a lot easier if you use the Q&A session, and I will then act as your proxy questioner. So I will ask all the questions to the presenters. We're going to have a short question round after each presentation, and if we have time afterwards, we might have an overarching Q&A session after we heard all the presentations. That's it from my side. I'm really looking forward to that panel. We're going to have great presentations today and in the upcoming days. Thank you.
Thank you. And don't forget to register to our other sessions of panel 3. Eric Bush, the floor is yours.
To everybody, we are obviously facing audio problems. At least I and Maureen can't hear the audio, so we just restart the presentation in a second. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Ladies and gentlemen, effectiveness of rebate programs, Swiss case studies. We would like to share our experiences with you, the experiences of Top 10 and the power utility of the city of Zurich. Some words on Top 10. Top 10 is an online platform for best products with a focus on energy efficiency, environment and performance. It shows some 70 product lists with 8,000 products. Top 10 is quite popular in Switzerland. We have something like 520,000 sessions and 1.9 million page views per year. It's often used as the basis for rebate programs for the selection criteria. Top 10 was founded in the year 2000. It's now online in 19 countries. The European platform is top10.eu, where you have access to many national sites in Europe. On the picture you see a typical product list. Refrigerators here. For each refrigerator you have the key specifications, and you also see the shops where you can buy these products. You see the daily updated prices, and when you click on a shop logo, it yields you directly to the product site in the shop. Now some words on the power utility of the city of Zurich. Their business is production, transmission, distribution and sales of electrical energy. They have more than 1,000 employees, more than 200,000 customers and a turnover of 900,000 euros. The power utility of the city of Zurich is committed to avoid unnecessary energy consumption. They are committed to energy efficiency and to renewable energies, and they do not want new supply contracts with nuclear power plants. The power plant has long experiences with rebate programs. Rebate programs for appliances. I would like to start with some questions. Why are there so few rebate programs for appliances in Europe? Is it necessary to request for each and every subsidy a detailed application form? How to adapt program designs to specific goals? What about cost efficiency? I hope that the Swiss case studies can provide some inspiration for you. Okay, some words on market transformation. Basically, for all product categories, we have a kind of Gauss curve, which shows that there are some few very efficient products. We have a majority of average models, and we have some inefficient models. Now the goal is to move the development towards energy efficiency, to move this curve from the right to the left. We have different kinds of policy instruments. We have the MAPs, Minimum Efficiency Performance Standards, which ban the inefficient models, like it has been done, for example, for the incandescent lamps. They are banned. We cannot buy them anymore. Then we have information tools like the energy label, which has an impact on the whole range of products. And we have instruments like Top 10, which presents best products, which obviously has a focus on very efficient, on best products. Rebate programs, of course, also have a focus on good products, because it makes no sense to subsidize inefficient products. Let's go to a real example, to the market share of refrigerator models in Switzerland, June 2021. As you expected, there are only very few models in the very energy efficient classes A, B, C, and there is a majority of models in the energy label class E. Switzerland has taken the decision to make the selection criteria for rebate programs at the class D. Criteria too stringent. You don't get volume, you cannot subsidize enough products. On the other hand, if you set the selection criteria too weak, there is nearly no improvement and no impact. This slide shows you that energy classes really matter. On the left side you see the efficiency index of refrigerators for the different classes. On the right-hand side, this is translated to electricity costs of typical two-door refrigerators in euros over 15 years, assuming that a kilowatt hour costs 20 euro cents. For example, you see that a F-class refrigerator consumes 50% more energy than a refrigerator in the D-class, and this results in additional electricity costs of 270 euros over the lifetime. Here you see the market share of dishwashers in Switzerland. Dishwashers must be in the class A or B to qualify for rebate programs. I would like to discuss with you different types of rebate programs, and especially I would like to distinguish between the roles of the applicant, the beneficiary of the rebates, and the user. So the very classical cases, the very classical rebate programs, somebody buys, let's say, a refrigerator, he applies for a rebate and he will use this refrigerator. Very similar, it works also for companies. More interesting, case 3 and 4. An organization buys appliances which they do not use themselves. For example, we have a landlord buying refrigerators for all his apartments. He receives rebates. The private user, the tenant, does not get the rebate, but he will benefit of the reduced electricity costs. Similar with the food industry, many, let's say, ice cream freezers are provided for free to shops and to restaurants. That means the food industry buys ice cream freezers, gets the rebate, and the shops and the restaurants benefit of lower electricity costs. Even more interesting is the case with the retailers and installers. The retailers do manage somehow the rebate program. This means the retailer have to apply for the rebate. They get it, but they forward the rebate to the buyer. In other words, when a consumer buys a product at a retailer in a shop, he gets the rebate directly as a price off without any applications. In the last case 6, the rebate is provided to retailers, but the retailer is not obliged to forward this rebate to the end consumers. So the purpose of this rebate is to motivate the retailers to sell more energy efficient appliances, which can be done by price offs or with communication measures. Let's bring the last slide on the point. The question is, who has the burden to write an application? Who gets the money? We have seen for private users, it's usually big work to apply for small appliances, for small subsidies. For landlords or companies, it's still considerable work to make the application, but hopefully for a big subsidy, so it's worthwhile. Retailers or installers, they can take over the work of application and transfer the subsidies directly as a price off to consumers. This means no work for the consumers, very efficient. And the last case, the retailers get the subsidy in order to sell as many as possible efficient products. They can optimize the range of products, they can provide price offs, or they can take communication measures. It's just up to them. Here we go to the impact mechanisms of rebate programs. Firstly, we have a direct effect. Every purchase of an efficient product results in an energy saving compared to an average product. However, maybe even more important, rebate programs can influence the purchasing behavior of large professional procurers on a long term, and rebate programs can have a strong influence on manufacturers, importers and retailers, that they optimize their product range or that manufacturers develop better products. This slide shows the Swiss rebate programs for top 10 products. It shows the categories, it shows amounts of the rebates in Zurich and in Switzerland. The cost efficiency is about 13 euro cents per kilowatt hour. Here you see the information about the rebate program, the nationwide rebate program, Energy Efficiency in Trade. The key issue is that the subsidies are reimbursed directly in the shop as a discount, as a price off. The budget of this program is 2.5 million euros, duration 3 years, funding area all over Switzerland, 7 shops are involved. They are now working for all preparations, and the implementation in the shops should start soon. Here the nationwide rebate program for large property owners, budget about 2.3 million euros, duration also 3 years. The goal of this program is to contribute to solve the landlord-tenant dilemma. It is landlords have to pay more for energy efficient appliances, but they do not have the benefit as the tenant is then paying less electricity costs. With the rebate program we have a win-win situation. The landlords get subsidies and the tenant saves electricity, so both parties are benefiting. There was also a rebate program for commercial appliances over whole Switzerland. The savings potentials for commercial and professional appliances are very high. Accordingly, the cost efficiency of this program was very good. It was only 1.6 euro cents per kilowatt hour. In 2011, there was a national bonus program for best appliances. It was a Type 6 program. The retailer got the rebates to steer promotions. There was only little administrative burdens. This program was very successful, very good cost efficiency, not even 1 euro cent per kilowatt hour. My conclusions. Wanted. I would love to see more innovative designs of rebate programs. When making rebate programs, the requirements should be sufficiently strict so that we can avoid watering can promotion. Skip unnecessary bureaucratic program requirements. This is very important. We have seen well-designed programs can reach high cost efficiency, and rebate programs can bring additional benefit, market transparency, communication impact, and acceleration of market transformation towards energy efficiency. Thank you very much for your interest, and I'm looking forward to your questions and to your feedback.
Thank you so much, Eric, for this fascinating presentation. Clémence will be asking, we'll see if there are any questions, and he will ask them directly to you. Eric, you can put your camera on, please.
And now we see you live, which is great. So thank you very much for the presentation. There's one question which immediately came to my mind too in the chat already, and this is whether the prices of the appliances in Switzerland did go up. So did the suppliers or all the shops somehow factor in that there are the rebate programs and increase the prices for the appliances by a similar amount? So more or less the advantage of the rebate program in financial terms was absent in the end, or are there mechanisms to avoid that?
And we didn't see this effect. In fact, in the last program you have seen the shop, but maybe it was too quickly, the shop has received a certain small amount for energy efficient products. And the shop was very interested to get this amount and therefore took a lot of measures to push the selling of them. So the price of which the shop provided to the customers was even higher than the rebate that he got from the government. Maybe an important point is that shops, maybe 50% of their sales, and they make promotions with price offs of something like 40 or 50%. They do it anyway, but the question is, for which product do they make the promotions and the high price offs? And the interesting experience was that there's very, very little incentives of some euros. They could be moved to make the promotions to the good products. Otherwise, they would have had different criteria. They would have taken any product for the promotion. So this was a very interesting experience for us, with how little effort they could be pushed to take the good products.
I've got one additional question before we also have to move on in the program, I think. And out of interest, how do you you said make the program simple, which is also my mantra when I speak about support schemes. But how were you able to explain that to the government, who always has the interest of spending every euro or Swiss franc very well and only to the people who really need it? So in my experience, I experienced always that fear of free ridership and so on, and all the different effects which could counterfeit the effect, and this can lead to tendency to over-engineer the programs usually, and we all know that the simpler the program, the better people will accept it, and the higher the acceptance rate will be. But how do you tell that to your government? How do you get the government support such a scheme?
Well, this is a challenge, you're right, because each requirement does sound very simple. For example, the government wants that no rebate is given for purchases which are anyway economic. So they say the payback must be more than 4 years. But how to find this out in the concrete case, and how to communicate, and you only get a rebate if the payback is more than 4 years. And so these are very difficult points in the praxis, but they sound very easy and reasonable for the government. Another thing was that they wanted to know who gets the rebate. So this means we should store something like 40,000 names and addresses. And fortunately, we were able to explain them that there were huge data protection problems. So we could convince them that they don't need the name, but they want to know the town where somebody has bought this product. Actually, I don't see a reason why we need to know from which city somebody buys an efficient refrigerator, as long as it's in the area of Switzerland.
From a policy perspective, I could not agree more. Individually, as a researcher, I would be very much interested in all the data sets to do great analysis with that. But
absolutely.
No, I couldn't agree more. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but the chat and the Q&A session is still open, and we might answer them in between. I might post answers and post it directly to Eric. If you have further questions which come to you later, just post them there and I will forward it to Eric and we'll be able to answer that. And if you have other additions, also start a discussion in the community, engage. We're all, of course, missing the chats in between the presentations and the panels. From my side, thank you very much, Eric, and I give over to Marine for introducing our next speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Clémence, for these amazing questions. My next speaker is Amandine Gall. We are moving directly from Switzerland to Canada, and Amandine is going to present us the Super ESCO model, and she will present the case of SOFIAC in Canada and beyond. So I'm super excited to hear that, because I must say, Clémence and I would discuss that a lot, and I find it super interesting. Amandine, the floor is yours.
Everybody. Today I will present you some elements about finding the right way for a Super ESCO to take off and the special case of SOFIAC in Canada. My name is Amandine Gall. I work for Econolaire for more than 10 years, and I am an energy efficiency engineer. So today the presentation is structured in two elements, with what is a Super ESCO and how to create a Super ESCO. First of all, I'd like to make a special acknowledgement to Pierre Langlois, the president of Econolaire. Works in the field of ESCO and Super ESCO for more than 40 years. He is really the soul of this presentation, and he really is the soul of SOFIAC in Canada. So what is a Super ESCO? The Super ESCO concept was developed in the 90s as a potential solution to address not only the limitation of the energy performance contracting, which we call it EPC, but also the ESCO community lacks of capacity, willingness, interest to get involved in project financing. So it's really both aspects. So as a special organization, a Super ESCO must possess all necessary capacity to develop adapted concept and produce complete set of documentation, client proposal, procurement, so on, which is called here templates and contracts. Also, measurement and verification plan. Measurement and verification is a key aspect of EPC schemes, and also a key aspect in Super ESCO development. A Super ESCO must have strong capacity in identifying business opportunities in market, a viable technology, project development, implementation cost, etc. Okay, this means that the Super ESCO make it easier to identify the untapped opportunity for using EPC in special targeted market, and can be seen not as competitor of ESCO, but rather as a facilitator, really to help and develop grow the market. So Super ESCO fulfill a role in relation both to project hosts here, but also to private ESCO. And it really is a balance between both, and it develops and manages all the necessary tools to develop an EPC project, build the capacity of ESCO, and so on. So now I would like to present you SOFIAC. SOFIAC is Super ESCO works for the private sector. Many of Super ESCO that are known worldwide are public Super ESCO, but this one is a private Super ESCO launched in 2020 in Quebec, Canada. It's thought of a one-stop shop with a financial innovation and agile operation. It's offer a project for industrial, commercial real estate, and multi-residential. Its main characteristic, it's a turnkey project, of course, with minimal client involvement, implemented by qualified ESCO, which helps a lot because in Quebec you have a kind of strong market of ESCO. It's a 100% non-resource financing adapted to energy efficiency project in share saving modes without the impact of the financing capacity of the client. It could be long-term agreement up to 15 to 10 years, thinking more to a contract between 10 to 15 years. It will be open book approach for customization and also really important, as I told you already, an independent MNV management, which is key. So just to let you know, SOFIAX is called as this for Société de Financement et d'Accompagnement en Performance Énergétique, which means in English, company in financing and supporting in energy performance. So SOFIAC business model innovation, it's a really usual super ESCO business model. So you have the four main partners. So you have the SOFIAC here, which is a super ESCO. You have the banking institution, which finances a portion of the required capital and determines the reimbursement, which is reimbursed directly by SOFIAC. You have the private ESCO, where there is a guarantee saving contract between the private ESCO and the SOFIAC with energy performance contract and also paid outside closing payment if related. The private ESCO design, build, commission the project, and the SOFIAC have a shared saving contract directly with the client, and so the MNV is directly delivered by SOFIAC, which might be a little bit different from other super ESCOs. So here, I'd like to take some time to present you the path to how SOFIAC was created. So as you can see here, it took approximately 11 years for the SOFIAC Super ESCO to materialize from the discussion that started in 2010, 2009 until 2020 when it was launched, and in 2021 it's operating. In retrospect, the initial spark came at the moment of the government of Quebec embraced the idea that emission reduction target and fighting climate change would require a substantial amount of capital, much exceeding the $3 billion in the form of grant being dispersed at the time, which was in the 2010s. The National Energy Agency of Quebec had a team, and the team established by Econolaire. Econolaire is a consulting company based in Quebec, specialized in energy efficiency financing and ESCO scheme, working worldwide. So both enter into discussion about e-financing and possible way to eliminate barriers that prevent energy efficiency market and so on. So they developed a report. Some discussion were going, but that stopped here. Then, in 2017, the Ministry of Finance of Quebec approached Econolaire, thanks to its knowledge in the energy efficiency market and the ESCO market, with a request to update the reports that were prepared in 2010, because emission targets have been increased, which were an increased grant spending, and in Quebec there is no other way really to implement energy efficiency, like no other innovative financing approach. So also, at the time, Fonds d'Action, it's a labor fund managing net assets totalizing $2.5 billion, which invested in hundreds of businesses and financial market in Quebec, but with the aim of favoring investment that generate positive economic, social, and environmental impacts, okay? On top of financial return, still wanted financial return, but more focus on economic, social, environmental. So this Fonds d'Action was among the members of the National Energy Agency of Quebec, and they heard about this idea and they became very interested in the existing opportunity for investing in innovative new energy efficiency financing model, new in Quebec. Among this discussion, they embraced the Super ESCO model, which subsequently led to the creation of the first super ESCO in Canada, which is Sofiac. So then the National Energy Agency of Quebec provided a constant support from 2018 and 2020. So the consortium Fondation Econolaire could reach the goal, establishing all the necessary tools and documents and so on to launch a super ESCO. At the same time, the government of Quebec expressed its readiness to take a concessional position with Fondation and become an equity investor in the super ESCO. So at this time, they received a strong political backing at the highest government level. So there is it unlocks a series of successful next steps. So the consortium approached Ministry of Economy of Quebec with the goal of convincing them to invest in the fund, as well also to dedicate some grant research to back up this mechanism. And this launched a $5.5 million of subsidy was negotiated. And then it was agreed that $150 million would be invested in the fund, would be $90 million in debt, $60 million in equity, and Fondation has already committed $20 million. Happening what happened, plenty of history came, and plenty of new partner wanted to enter, but the consortium didn't find the equity partner, neither debt, so on. So at the time, here in 2020, it was decided, Fondation decided to step in and become the sole equity partner, even though the government will not coming its additional $20 million on this condition, because the condition to commit the $20 million was with $150 million in the fund. But at this time, Fondation decided to increase their share to $20 million, the share of $20 million to $30 million, and ended up with a smaller fund of $90 million. So it was in 2020. In 2021, in March, we had a $100 million pipeline after 6 months operation, and they started negotiation with second lender. So the initial funding plan, just to recall, is we have a part of subsidies that covers transaction costs. So it's a part, a subsidy for design and implementation of Sofiac, and a part for reducing transaction costs, and it comes from the government of Quebec. And then the 30 million of Fondation share and 60 million from the consortium debt fund, which is reaching the 90 millions initial debt fund. It's how it was launched, it's how it's now currently running, and we hope to be able to present you the first results soon. One thing we wanted to tackle also was the super ESCO opportunity to increase the profitability of the scheme. The Paris Agreement allows cooperative approach to reach each country climate goals under Article 6, thanks to international transfer mitigation outcomes called ITMOs. These ITMOs are calculated with a clean development mechanism and methodology, which is not really the same approach as its IPMVP. It's an international performance measurement and verification protocol, which is used in main ESCO project and so super ESCO schemes, and it leads this one to a limited use of the super ESCO approach under the Article 6, but hopefully it will be overcome eventually. Also, another aspect where super ESCO could be really valuable, it's in white certificate or energy efficiency certificate. So super ESCO can be seen as a voluntary agent and use an aggregated approach, because he had aggregated several projects that usually one ESCO have only some few projects, and the super ESCO can act as a voluntary agent, have a competitive advantage compared usual ESCO, since they're able to aggregate the energy saving from all the projects and thereby reduce transaction cost. So it's something that it's a very good opportunity for super ESCO worldwide. And finally, the super ESCO concept intersects and interacts with a wide range of national, international systems, and it's strongly influenced by political context, adopted regulation, and financial infrastructure. So we have tried to systemize SOFIAC experience and some international example to design a common framework that can be used for adapted for the need of designing a super ESCO model worldwide. So mainly it starts with an analysis of the context, policy assessment, institutional readiness, and decision-maker engagement. The decision-maker engagement, as you have seen with SOFIAC, even if it's a private super ESCO, that the public sector, the ministry, in this case of Quebec, really were engaged, which helps a lot to unlock many barriers related to super ESCO implementation. So then the implementation, first you set up a partnership, you develop all the toolbox with the contract, with all the MNV plan and forms and so on, and you adapt the strategy depending on the ESCO market and the energy efficiency market that you have in your context. During the operation, what you need to do is you continuously improve, you upgrade, and you really try to evolve within the context. And one thing that is really, really important is to evaluate at some point, after a period of time, the operations that you have developed in your super ESCO, and it will help to involve more partner, thanks to showing the impact not only in energy saving but also in safety, health, employment, and all the benefits of energy efficiency. So thank you very much, and the paper is available, and you can contact me if you have any further question. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and I'm curious when we to see the first results. Then when that really gets going, and we can see what are the real life results. Do you already have a feeling in which kind of measures the capital will go? So which sectors, which kind of technologies will the super ESCO focus on in that specific case?
Currently in the pipeline, they are discussing more with industry. Mm-hmm. One thing that I didn't mention, it's SOFIAC as due is with this large pipeline that they already have. Within 6 months, I told you 100 million. I don't know how much they have, but I'm thinking it's still increasing. They are thinking of going with SOFIAC outside of Quebec and do a SOFIAC Canada, more for the other provinces like Ontario, where there is Toronto, and British Columbia with Vancouver mainly. So it's a very promising experience. It's very different from other super ESCO, which are more public super ESCO, as we say, but it's really promising. It's working quite well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really curious, because we are always struggling to find instruments, especially to motivate to get more capital into industry too. And one additional question: is there any specific, when you think about transferability of the concept, mm-hmm. are there any specific political requirements you would see also in the policy framework which would be necessary to be in super ESCO success model? Or are there would you think that they would apply in a broad variety of markets and policy environments?
First of all, I think for super ESCO in general, you need a strong ESCO market. So you need to avoid all the legal barrier of the ESCO market, which are possible, which still occur in many countries. So first of all, it would be this. And then when you have a strong ESCO market, as it is a private ESCO, you don't have any specific regulation related to this. But still, as I mentioned, I think it's a really good idea to have a strong backup by the government, showing that, because as it is so innovative, it can frighten the usual investors. So usually you need a strong backup. And as you saw, we received around $5 million of grant, which helped for the launching, which is really important to launch this new innovative system due to high transaction cost at the beginning. And I'd like to point, sorry, Marine, I also live in Switzerland, so it was also staying back in Switzerland.
Okay, so yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much already. So we are currently good in our timing. So I would like to hand back to Marine to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, it's not one speaker, it's two for the price of one. It's very energy efficient. So now we have Jürgen Flusch and Winfried Braumann, who will be talking about holistic support of efficiency and renewable projects in industry along all phases of project development and implementation. It sounds really interesting. The floor is yours, Jürgen and Winfried.
Well, thank you very much. I will start with the first part of the presentation about holistic project development and implementation support for industrial efficiency and renewable projects. This is based on a Horizon 2020 project to finance and realize energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in industry. And Jürgen, please, the next slides. And I will be the one to talk about the more general aspects of preparing such projects and assessing them. And Jürgen will then talk about how we are implementing this assessment on the platform Trustee, which, Jürgen, the next slide, please, which we are currently, well, starting up as a commercial project. The initial project consortium is shown here, and three partners of this consortium, Intec, eceee, RENAG, and a fourth partner with an IT background, are currently starting this project for commercial deployment in Austria. Well, the issue is, of course, how can we decarbonize industry? There are, in principle, two simple levers by replacing fossil energy sources by renewable energy, and, of course, by reducing energy consumption with energy efficiency measures. But companies, manufacturers have to look upon those decarbonization issues in all three scopes, meaning the scope 1, direct emissions, which are under the control of the manufacturer, scope 2, the emissions which are generated by supplied energy from external sources, and the scope 3 covers emissions upstream and downstream in imported products, so to say, and also in emissions which are produced by the products when they are used by their customers, by the consumers. We are talking here primarily, of course, about scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 1, saving energy for emissions under own control, and scope 2, replacing fossil energy sources by renewable energy. Jürgen, please the next one. Well, normally such a project is viewed as from the perspective of decarbonization, which is financed by the asset owner, by the owner of the company. The asset owner in this case is planning, financing, constructing, and operating the energy efficiency installation on his own. And therefore, project preparation will primarily deal with the technical aspects of such a project. Project preparation also has to include normally also possible questions and problems which are to be tackled on the level of financiers like banks. But in practice, we do think that this case will not be the normal case because we have a structural problem here. Industry is not meant primarily to produce, to generate energy, and therefore also not to invest in producing and generating energy. They should produce services or products and goods. And those production investments are normally considered with lower amortization times, and they are considered as the core assets. Energy assets are not the core assets. Therefore, we think that industry will not be able and will not be willing to do all those investments itself, but will look at the alternative of third-party investment, where a supplier or an ESCO invests, and where the investment is paid off by the industrial company under the title of energy service or energy supply contracts. The next one, please. But in this case, project preparation and assessment of projects is not simple anymore. Many perspectives of different partners and parties in such a project have to be considered. We have engineers, technology suppliers. We have the ESCO possibly integrating all those installation and then delivering energy or energy savings to the customer. We have, of course, primarily also to look at the customer who has to make savings in order to be able to repay. And then we have all the financial and commercial aspects of such a project, where a bank normally is involved, where investors might be involved, because the ESCO might aim at selling receivables to the capital market, where balance sheet issues are involved, and also public guarantees, as we will see in a minute, will play a very important role. So the issues for successful project development are covering a lot of aspects. Of course, all kinds of technical issues, the assessment of those issues. It has to cover the supplier, the product quality questions, and it has to deal with the financial viability of such a project, which is very much centered on the assessment of risks. Jürgen, could you come to the next one? Well, risk, credit risk, and performance risk is very much at the center of financial analysis and financial feasibility of such projects. The investor, who in the case of a third-party finance project possibly will either act as a financer of a special purpose vehicle or will invest by purchasing receivables against the customer, has to deal with the credit risk, the credit risk, meaning that payment of receivables by the customer is, of course, the critical question for the investor in order to be able to cover the investment he has made. Of course, there are already existing instruments in order to cover such risks. This is credit insurance, this might be bank guarantees, and if it is an export business, it's also the possibility to cover it by an export guarantee. The other aspect of risks which have to be borne by the investor are performance risks, because in case of the non-performance by the ESCO or by a supplier, the customer will not pay, and therefore the investor is faced by a risk which is not controlled by himself, but by the ESCO or by the supplier. But again, there are some instruments to cover those risks, like supplier warranties, performance guarantees, maybe third-party insurance, or even bank guarantee coverage. Well, if we look at this slide, it looks a bit complicated, and in fact it is. What I just wanted to show here is that we think that the most appropriate guarantee instrument to cover such risks would be a public guarantee structured like an export guarantee. Might seem a little surprising, but export guarantees have been available since many years to cover risks of customers which might have a credit risk issue, but only in export cases. If we are transferring this principle, this very well-established principle of export guarantees, to covering the risks of EPC contracts, of third-party finance projects, we could cover the credit risk, the trade credit risk of such projects. And this will be necessary indeed, as there will be many customers, SMEs or even bigger companies, who otherwise will not be eligible based on their credit risk standing for long-term financing and for long-term investment. But with the backup of a public guarantee structure like an export guarantee, it would be even possible to put a bank guarantee on top of this export guarantee, which even would be able to cover performance risks. Well, and then, Jürgen, there is another issue which has come up recently and which certainly will also drive the market. This is the issue whether such an investment is really green and complies with the EU taxonomy. The taxonomy has been published for a comprehensive strategy to connect finance with sustainability by defining environmentally sustainable investments. And compliance with the taxonomy will be very important to get better financing conditions, to get into asset classes of higher liquidity. Banks will prefer loans and financing based on sustainable economic activities, and manufacturers and service providers will try to show that their economic activities are really in line with the taxonomies. Therefore, all parties in a financial transaction in future will need a taxonomy compliance assessment. And also this has to be introduced and has to be covered by the kind of platform we are proposing with Trustee. Jürgen, the floor is yours.
So, well, the platform that Winfried has already mentioned is the key of doing this project assessment that we have now already presented. The big vision of what we want to do is we want to get rid of the high transaction costs. We want to do this by at least a semi-automated project assessment covering the technical assessment and the economic assessment of these projects that Winfried has already mentioned right now. So the platform shall be simple, very flexible, cover the technical and the economic aspects. It shall be accessible to project developers, technology suppliers, but of course also industry end users, and shall address also the taxonomy issues and also include the guarantees that are by this then necessary. So we cover or at which moments of the project development and the project implementation is trustee relevant. Basically, our idea is to be on board from the very beginning, saying, okay, if a project supplier, project developer is interested to get such a funding or financing via trustee, well, then he or she has the possibility to register itself at the very early stage of such a project. Meaning that at this moment we say, if you fulfill some defined criteria, the probability to get this financing is very high. So we offer basically also a kind of a support in the project development, but this is only a kind of a consultancy, a discussion with the proposals that we're doing. And at the very end, we have the financing issue. What is on board? The three stakeholders that are necessary, the industrial companies, we have the technology suppliers and the financial investors on board. The platform itself works in 3 steps. The first one is a very easy to access automated project check. So somebody who is asking for this financing, asking for the project assessment, has to provide some basic information about which technology, which savings are expected, some technical and economic information about the end user, and some economic information about the technology provider and the planner. And the platform automatically does this check and says, yes, is this an interesting project for us or not? In case of a rejection, there's a small explanation added to it. But in terms of in the moment of a successful acceptance, the proposal is automatically guided to the second step. Then we are asking for more details from the technical point of view, but also the economic point of view. What will allow us to do a very detailed project assessment with our models that we are running in the background. And again, an output is this an interesting project for us or not? In case of the rejections, same procedure, a small explanation why. And the second step, the second possibility is the acceptance. And then this is the first moment somebody of trustee is getting in contact with the proposer. So to this moment, everything is done completely automatically. And by this, we have the possibility to reduce the transaction cost significantly. And this is then also the moment where we're discussing risk assessment, insurance, the guarantees, the taxonomy issues at this very, very early stage of the project. And in case of a successful acceptance, then there is an agreement that in the moment of a successful implementation, a refinancing is guaranteed. Some nice screenshots from our platform that you have a first feeling and idea how this looks like. This is based on a FP7 project that we implemented in the largest brewery in Austria. So this was some work beforehand, and so we were focusing within this FP7 funded project on the solar thermal process heat implementation. So whatever we are providing here is based on this public available data that we have provided there. We have 3 partners. We have the technology supplier, what was the solar supplier. We have the end user, what is the brewery, and we have the financing partner in this example. At the very beginning, you see on the right side, somebody who is registering on the platform has to provide some basic information. So who you are, what you want to do, so that we can do this quick check if this proposal is interesting for us or not. At the second moment, you have to provide some basic information about where do you want to implement your project and which technology shall be implemented there. Again, you see very low level of information that is needed just to do this quick check if this project is interesting for us or not. And then it comes to the moment where we need some information about the end user. Again, you see the templates very clear. You have an handout at the very beginning so that you know when you're registering on the platform which information will be necessary to get this assessment done. And from the economic feasibility, this is the moment where we're asking the proposer, okay, which investment do we expect? What is the funding that you include? What operating and maintenance costs are necessary? And what is the yield in the lifetime of this project? With then the information of the substituted energy systems, meaning, do you want to substitute fossil fuels? Do you want to substitute electricity, for example? This enables the automatic check, the assessment if this project is from the economic point of view feasible or not. And the technical point of view is then depending on which technology you have selected. This is an example for the solar thermal implementation there. So again, we're asking, okay, what are the basic information about the production processes? As for the solar process, it is very, very important to know about the load profiles as we're doing the background simulation over 1 year. And then with this information, automatically in the background, we call a model, a background simulation that is done completely automatically, a high-level simulation based on our expertise that we brought into Trustee. And the output of this is then a comparison of what the proposer is expecting from his project to what our simulation delivers in terms of the results. And if these two figures or this assessment matches to a certain extent, then we say, yes, this project is interesting for us or not. As we call it, is this a bankable project or not? And the output at the very end is then a result file, so an auto-check file completely done automatically. And this is then the feedback that you get from the platform. An outlook, Trustee, I already mentioned, is ready to assess the projects, including the taxonomy approach. We are not the one who are doing the certification, but we include on our platform these criteria that are necessary as it is defined in the taxonomy actually. And we are addressing the credit risks and the performance risk as Winfried has told us. The taxonomy is very important actually in the community. What the taxonomy needs is a reliable assessment approach with low-level effort to avoid additional barriers and increase of the transaction costs. So exactly what we wanted to get rid of to ensure that this is also the case when you're talking about the taxonomy. And with this, I hand back to Clemens, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Jürgen. Thank you for a very interesting presentation, and I think the aspect of financing cannot be discussed enough because this is a crucial issue. I've got one question to you. You now presented in your example, or to both of you in your example, you focused very much on renewable projects and then talking very much about energy supply all the time, whereas energy efficiency projects are very much closer to the process itself and much more linked to the industrial process, and are somehow a bit more complicated to implement. On the other hand, they might have multiple benefits beyond just the energy domain. Mm-hmm. Do you also, or do you see bigger challenges in implementing them in your platform because they are usually the more complex projects which are more integrated in the process? Or if you can say some words about that, perhaps.
Maybe Winfried, if I can start. Well, generally the Trustee project has focused on thermal efficiency, so excess heat recovery. This is already implemented on the platform, and we have the renewable energy carriers also linked to thermal energy demand. So biomass, biogas, solar thermal, these are already implemented. We already extended it now to photovoltaics, and actually we are discussing with the project proposer. So in case the proposer brings in enough projects, then we are ready to implement these new technologies to our platform. This is just a small module that is well interlinked to all the other procedures. So we see no challenge to do this. For example, right now we are addressing also energy efficiency in terms of control optimization. So this is something we're discussing actually with an Austrian supplier. So I see no challenge to do this in the platform.
Okay. Thank you very much. In order to give, if you want to add, yeah, please, Winfried, go ahead. Sorry.
Speaking, there is not that much structural difference between energy efficiency and energy supply projects. And in any case, the ideal case would be when they can be combined, when the energy supplier is also taking care of energy efficiency investments and is supplying energy already deducting the so-called saved energy. Therefore, I think it might be, of course, a bigger issue for measuring the effects of energy savings compared to energy supplies, but the structures are very much the same.
Yeah, thank you very much. In order to give Stefan enough time for his presentation and perhaps an upcoming Q&A, I would like to move forward and give back to Marine.
Yes, thank you so much, Clémence. Thank you so much, Jürgen and Winfried, for this excellent presentation. So now our last speaker of the day is Stefan Büttner, who is the Director of Global Strategy at the Institute for Energy Efficiency in Production. And he will be talking about looking behind decarbonization, what pressure points trigger action. Sounds interesting.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the introduction. Over the past 2 years, and that's nearly exactly 2 years ago, since the big major announcement, the big major pledge towards decarbonization was made. But what leads companies to actually pledge? What are the pressure points behind that triggers such action? That is something that we're going to have a brief look into in the next couple of minutes. So why do companies pledge to decarbonize? What is the range of factors that potentially influence their decision to do so? And is it really the environmental consciousness or something else that motivates them? So understanding what those pressure points are, the subtle triggers, and the underlying considerations, as well as the hope for benefits, may facilitate us to tailor fitting policies that then appeal to these triggers and considerations to develop supporting schemes that expedite decarbonization of the industrial sector. And that is important without harming the sector's competitiveness or even existence. So with these kind of findings, we'll be able to inform policymakers and allow companies to reflect upon the points made in the due process of making up their mind whether they would like to decarbonize or not, and how to shape their own decarbonization strategy. So as we have all noticed over the past 2 years, the societal expectations have been rising a lot. There have been lots of societal movements such as Fridays for Futures, Scientists for Futures. There were investors coming up with demands. With the COVID crisis, there have been calls to use the recovery funds, keeping in mind a green transition, but also increasingly investors impose pressures. And lastly, over the past couple of weeks, we have also heard more and more countries tightening their goals. So for example, when the US doubled theirs, or Britain announced their new goal, or the European Union. Now that is something that we're going to look deeper into. How did we go about? We combined a number of methods, and that allowed us to look at the whole topic with an holistic angle to identify what are the decarbonization drivers for the manufacturing companies. So we combined literature review and announcements of companies. We did a number of in-depth interviews in our day-to-day interaction with manufacturers, be very small ones or be huge ones, to understand what really drives them, what their issues are, and what their plans are effectively. And that we used as a basis to survey about 860 companies, manufacturing companies within Germany in the spring last year, so in midst of the pandemic. And now let's dive in. Is that a topic that we can really avoid tackling? And why should I as a company become carbon neutral or climate neutral now? One could think we have ETS in Europe, we have specific emission pricing schemes, for example, in Germany. However, the screenshot that you see here is something as of late 2020, where the World Bank has sketched that about 22% of global emissions are covered by one or another, at least draft carbon pricing scheme. 1 year before that, so in mid-2019, it was only 14 percentage points. So that is really growing. There is a decreasing amount of space to really deviate. Also, we have heard that the European Commission is contemplating how to put this carbon border tax scheme into place or not, and if in alliance with other regions that have a carbon pricing scheme in place or not. So that is really something that reduces the space not to do anything. Also, looking at Europe itself, the timing is an issue. And timing because as of the last half year, ETS prices have doubled. And not only the amount of certificates on the market have decreased. Also, ETS has more and more become something that speculators are looking into. So it is something that causes a tremendous cost risk for those that have to purchase emission certificates. On the other hand, there are national schemes emerging. The orange line you see here is the German national scheme that was introduced in the beginning of 2021. That allows planability. However, it also outlines that the price will increase on a year-by-year basis for everything that is not electricity. And with a recent court ruling, this figure may even increase tremendously before or after the federal election, which is due in September. Now, looking at the pressure points that we identified, some of them I already mentioned. The primary one is that companies understandably want to sell their products. Was it in the previous century mostly working conditions and child labor that influenced buyers on whether or not they avoid buying a product? It has more and more become also an issue of whether the product underlies fair trade rules, and lately more and more environmental considerations came into consideration of customers. So it's not only what happened over the past years, whether the mining of, for example, lithium is harmful to the environment, or whether planting soy leads to deforestation, or whether rapeseed for biofuels takes space away for eatable crops. It's also, and that is actually fairly recent, that last week in a German news show, they indicated that that 3/4 of clients going to supermarkets would like something that is similar to a Nutri-Score for the environmental performance of products, so that they can buy accordingly. So these aspects have an increasing weight on the image of products and consequently the reputation of a company, whether they can sell their product. But there are also other factors that play into the image. It's the employer as an attractiveness also, but it's also the attractiveness to investors. We'll come to that in a moment. The attractiveness is something, the image is something that can be severely harmed by something that can happen through indirect factors. For example, if you are an infrastructure company in the railway business and you would like to sell railway signals, that is per se something that is good. However, if you sell those signals to a new railway line to an environmentally very bad coal mine in Australia, then you get a very, very bad press and even calls for a boycott. And there, a company cannot really afford applying different standards in different countries and regions of this world. So this is something that is really of big relevance globally, and one can very, very easily trap into one of those puddles. So that aside, we also have supply chain issues. Very recently, that is currently in the trilogue, we have the supply chain regulation of the European Union, but also, at least in Germany, other countries may already have something in development. We have supply chain laws and requirements that put significant weight on companies to make sure a certain range of elements that I mentioned earlier on are kept or worked according to throughout the whole supply chain of the product. That's one element. Also, another element that plays into that is that there's in some sectors a very, very low vertical range of manufacturing, meaning that the company that puts the pieces together, for example, a car company, only is responsible for about 10% of the footprint. So 90% of the footprint is with the supply chain before that. And there has been an increasing supply chain pressure also on suppliers to green their products, to disclose the footprint of those products. For example, Volkswagen needs to do that when they want to hand over their electric vehicles with a zero carbon footprint at the point of handover. So that is one component. Another component is the employer's attractiveness. Despite rising unemployment due to COVID and the economic crisis going along, there is a skills shortage. And there were studies, for example, by YouGov indicating that the majority of young people that are about to graduate value the environmental consciousness of their future employer higher than a starting salary. Of existing workforce, 2/3 care for the sustainability intentions of their companies. So that becomes a really important issue in the context of the shortage of skilled personnel, but also the refinancing and the investment rentability. So for example, at the New York Climate Summit in 2019, investors for the first time indicated that they are not going to invest into companies any further that have an expiry date on their business model. Also, there was a huge surge on ETFs and other financing products that are sustainable. That is one component, but also the bigger picture, or the companies that are already in majority ownership of such investors, or even minority owners, can impose a tremendous pressure. For example, the oil company Exxon, as a minority shareholder that is environmentally very conscious, and they now end up having 3 seats on their board, and Exxon needs to move. So that aside, we also have climate risks. BASF had a huge issue serving their plant in Ludwigshafen with goods when the Rhine River level was too low for transport. Also, we can see what happens in a pandemic, or even when the Suez Canal was blocked, how our supply chains get interrupted. So how do companies react? One example from the automotive industry is a pledge that was done very early, and I'm sure many of you guess which company I'm referring to here, is if you act early, you display leadership. Yeah, and through that leadership, you apply not only pressure on competitors, but also you have nearly inclusive first mover advantage in terms of PR. You appear conscious to attract that scarce personnel that I mentioned earlier, and you also display being on top of the game. You innovate, you are able to attract new personnel and to display that you're innovative and future-proof in a disrupted automotive sector. But also, an increasing number of car manufacturers impose pressure on their supply chain, also the company that pledged here, to deliver zero carbon products or pre-products. Remaining attractive to investors is a very important element in order to keep the capital required to get operating. However, it also makes economic sense, depending on how the decarbonization mix is structured. In this instance, that company pledged in 2019 to spend 2 billion euros over 11 years to become net zero in 2020. And by 2030, they assumed that they will have spent only 1 billion. So they forecasted to have saved 1 billion euros over 11 years. However, that is not even considering the steep increase of ETS and the introduction of a national carbon pricing scheme. Also, with the measures put in place, for example, local generation, storage, etc., they were able to disconnect themselves early from increasing costs and supply shocks in respect of renewables and compensation products, and also reducing their payments to outsiders. Also, there would be the opportunity to compensate the remaining emissions by offering scrappage bonuses on their own products sold outside. Obviously, that also all leads to increased energy productivity competitiveness. And as we have already seen, one can get paid showing others how to replicate becoming carbon neutral. Even if you as a company, if you have done it once, you can't do it again, but you can show others how to do so. So from that, we built 7 packages of assumed motivators: long-term economic advantages, CSR, reduction of cost risk, customer requirements, image improvement, government requirements, and investor requirements. Those we tested with those 860 companies, 855 decided to respond to that. We asked them, what is the top 3 priorities of those 7? And not surprisingly, the majority of companies chose long-term economic advantages as the first option. However, and we stick here to the first option, CSR considerations are a close second, and that ahead of other considerations. So how does this look if we look deeper, for example, by company size? There the picture changes quite tremendously. For example, large companies are by far those that most often mention long-term economic advantages as the primary motivator, the primary driver. If we look at micro companies, for them, it's the corporate social responsibility consideration. Also, for example, image improvement is much, much higher for small and medium-sized companies and chosen only by very few large companies as primary driver. These are only very, very brief intro into that data. We have much more and we'll go deeper in it in further publications. And that data is currently being gathered in many more countries in the world. So please spread if you're interested to see how this looks like in different countries. Takeaways: the decarbonization drivers can be put into 4 boxes: societal drivers, workforce-related drivers, supply chain drivers, and investor-based drivers. And those that really need assistance are MSMEs, the small companies, particularly the micro companies, the energy-intensive industries, and the hard-to-abate sectors. And understanding that those decarbonization drivers will assist companies in shaping their net zero strategy. And if policymakers are also aware of that, they can shape their policies so that companies want to pledge. With that, I shall end. Many thanks for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan, for your very interesting presentation. I've got one question to you. When you think about decarbonization, it is very often again seen in the light of installing renewable energy or carbon offsetting and so on. And energy efficiency is in the order of potential actions, probably not the first for most companies. Do you have any insights from your data how energy efficiency is ranked by the companies, perhaps also depending on the company size?
Yes, thank you for that very interesting question. You're right. On the short term, on the first instance, many decision makers think about renewables and compensation first. But I'm glad that from the data we saw that companies on average pledge about 22.5% that they want to get rid of by 2025. And of that percentage, about 6 percentage points is from efficiency, 6 from renewables from the grid. So efficiency is the largest single component, and 60% of the intended measures are meant to be on-site, whereas 40% are off-site. However, that brings us in whole different areas of problems because there is not sufficient renewables in the mix, making it even more important to focus on local measures in a smart combination.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And unfortunately, we don't have much more time to discuss further. I would love to, but we are advised to be very strict on timing also to end our sessions. So Stefan, I thank you again, and I'm really looking forward to the further analysis on the topic, because I think it's super interesting to understand the motivation of companies on why they are investing, and we've done some research on that in the context of multiple benefits, which also shows that yeah, we have other motivations than perhaps we usually assume. let's put it like that.
Indeed.
I would love to thank all the speakers in that session for that very interesting session. The community could be a bit more active regarding questions. I know I have great questions, of course, but I think yours are even better. So I can only motivate you to write more questions in the chat, but also follow up in the community tools. I thank all the speakers. I hand back to Marine for the final words and the invitation to tomorrow, probably.
Yes, thank you. It's a very nice moment for me to wrap up because there is a thunderstorm arriving over Turin, so soon you won't hear me anymore. I would like to thank everyone who participated today. It was really super interesting, and I'm looking forward to our exchange, our further discussion, etc. Don't forget to log in tomorrow morning at 10:30 for our panel three following session. It will be on warming up in a digital world. So it's going to be super interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Really engaged, asking a lot of questions as well. And have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marine. Thank you, Clément. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.